Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Rebel News Daily Livestream. This is day 2 of our return to the live stream. I'm your host, Sheila Gunn Reid, and I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Tamara Ugolini. Tamara, how's it going? First of all, how was your new year? Was it good?
Well, we were all plagued with some virus once again, seems to be the actual new normal for anyone who has suffered at the hands of the health necromancers and their endless lockdowns and mandates. So we did have a great time spent at home with, the kids and my husband and I. And other than trying to get some rest and get caught up on all the things after nursing everyone back to health, it was nice. And what about you?
I wish I had stayed home. Let's just leave it at that. I'm too old to be having that much fun. We should tell everybody what we're doing today. This is the Rebel News Daily Livestream. As I said, this is day 2 of our return to the live stream. We were on a bit of a hiatus after the Public Order Commission, what we call the Trucker Commission. We were streaming for hours every single day and later into the evening, and it was just a lot. And we thought we would take some time to sort of rethink the format, maybe rethink who's hosting and what we're doing here, and maybe professionalize this thing, tighten up some of the segments and see what we can do to make it right, and also rethink the time. So this time is an hour later than it was yesterday. So friends at home, let us know in the comments, what time would you like to see us on air, because we're testing on a few different time slots and a rotating cast of hosts. So let us know what you think. I want to get some of the housekeeping stuff out of the way, and I want to mention early, because I didn't get to it yesterday, because boy, am I rusty at this. If you want to support the work that we do completely willingly, unlike what Justin Trudeau makes you do with the mainstream media who produce content you would never in a million years pay for, you can send us something, a paid chat. On Rumble, it's called a Rumble Rant. On Odyssey, it's called a Hyper Chat. And I think if it's $5 or more, we'll read it on air. But we appreciate every little bit that you do give us. It's just that we sort of run out of time reading all the smaller chats. However, they do remain highlighted so that people can see them. We're doing that because we're completely demonetized on the censorship platform of YouTube. They don't let us have super chats anymore. We're a little bit too truthful for YouTube. So we are streaming still, however, on YouTube, partly because they don't want us there. So we're on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, and Getter. So that's where we are right now. And I see Efron's little notes about further housekeeping. I should tell everybody that Kian Simone's latest documentary is available at albertadocumentary.com. It's called Ungovernable. It's about Alberta's quest for independence, and independence means different things to different people. Sometimes it means complete sovereignty. Sometimes it means a more Quebec-like deal and disengaging ourselves with the federal government. And that's available right now on our YouTube or at albertadocumentary.com. But that's not the only thing we have going. Kian is our head of documentaries, and he is going full steam. We've got a documentary about a Montreal police raid on Rebel News coming up, and another documentary about the Coots blockaders, because that's not over yet. Even though the Coots blockade resolved itself and set Alberta free from our vaccine passport, the troubles for the men involved are ongoing, including Pastor Art Pawlowski, by the way, who is charged with the only person in Alberta ever charged under the Critical Infrastructure Defense Act, an eco-terrorism law meant for pipeline exploders. They used it to criminalize giving a sermon of support to truckers making a moral stand at the border. Non-violent truckers, by the way. So that's what we've got in the works. I will turn this over to Tamara, because this is your article we're going to be discussing next. Why don't you take it away? And I'll shut up.
What a time to be alive, really. And thanks, Sheila, for running through all of that. Wow, there's so much to take care of, especially like you said, as we come back to the live stream. And I'm really eager to find out what people want to see more of, what time slots work for them, who they want to see on here. So please give us your feedback so that we can strategize and try to rejig things in a way that obviously best serves our audience, because you're the ones that keep the lights on. So we always look to you to see what direction that we should move in, and new beginnings. Here's to 2023. So unfortunately, it's thus far off to a more censorious start. And so this first article I published yesterday, and we do have an updated one as well, which does have a little bit of repetition, but we're hoping to tend to that. But essentially, as the title there says, the thought police have come for Jordan Peterson. So renowned author and clinical psychologist is now facing essentially re-education or retraining by his governing body, the Ontario College of Psychiatrists, because of his tweets. Who would have thought that a staunch advocate for free speech would be having his speech compelled by his governing body? So essentially, Peterson was given a letter that he is to partake in this re-education training, or he faces disciplinary action through the tribunal, which is, essentially a kangaroo court run by the governing body itself. And it could lead to him to have his license removed from being able to provide psychiatric help to his clients. And oddly enough, none of the complaints came from any of his past or present clients. And so I didn't mention it in the article here, but I wanted to tie it in with some of the coverage I've done here in Ontario as well with the CPSO, the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, because as we've seen throughout the COVID narrative, the college has squashed the speech of physicians all across Ontario, mandated that they comply with all COVID-related restrictions and regulations. And anyone who didn't has had their license suspended, revoked, or has faced, again, this disciplinary action or investigation by their college. So when Peterson says things like, the trust in institutions is at an all-time low, and your professionals from various sectors are being compelled and being forced to remain silent on things that they might want to speak adversely on, he's not wrong here, because we've seen this reoccurring theme. And again, especially throughout the COVID narrative, it's being highlighted by it and amplified by it, really. This is happening across the board to various sectors of our medical and other professionals, especially here in Ontario. And it's really concerning. And again, as a staunch advocate for free speech, to see someone with such a large platform and presence on social media being compelled. I'm really interested to see how Peterson's going to handle this, and of course, how it unfolds.
It's funny because somebody sent to me today, and I don't know if I'm going to mention her, but she is a conservative mom like us. She sent to me who she called the Peterson lady gulaggers, the ladies who were the ones who were complaining about him, Gail Siskind, and the other one is Erica Abner from the Touchstone Institute. They look exactly how you would think that lady gulagger censorship people would look. And, how did they think this was going to end for them? Peterson was trending yesterday on Twitter. Elon Musk weighed in. How did they think this is going to end? Peterson has been out against compelled speech since at least 2017 in the public eye, but probably long before that, as someone who thinks critically about these things all the time and cares about free thought and the ability to think your way through things and not have the state tell you what to think. He testified on the C-16 hearings, so that's the pronoun hearings. In 2017, in May of 2017, he was the loudest international voice against compelled speech in Canada since, I think outside of us, probably since, 5 years ago. How did the lady gulaggers think this was going to go for them? Of course, he's not going to bend the knee to them. He's made a career not bending the knee to them. This is him testifying at a Senate hearing. When they call it, hate propaganda if you misgender someone. He said, I'm not going to be impolite to people, but I'm not going to say the words you want me to say if the government is making me say them. So look behind him, it looks like the lady gulaggers, by the way. But I mean, who did they think they were coming for yesterday? That's the funny part in all of this is what kind of bubble are you in that you don't realize that he is probably outsold in the world only by the Bible. He's the most prominent thinker on freedom and free thought in the Anglosphere. What did they think was going to happen yesterday?
Well, and the college itself, I mean, are they prepared for the backlash that they're going to undoubtedly receive after putting forth such an Orwellian order on someone, the exact opposite of everything that they stand for? I mean, you don't get much more Orwellian than this, really. It's textbook 1984, right out of the playbook of the thought crimes and his wrongthink. That the thought police are now coming for him, and to allege that this somehow caused harm to, I don't know, I guess, what did you coin them, Sheila? The lady gulags?
Lady Gulaggers.
Yeah. That it somehow caused harm to people who are not being treated or assessed by Peterson. Like, this is just so grotesque that I again, what a time to be alive heading into 2023. Here we are fighting the same demons, it seems, as, you know, the last at least 2 years. But as you pointed out, Peterson's been at this for far longer than that. And it's just, it seems to be ricocheting out instead of being reined back in. And so I just wonder, at what point does that pendulum start to come back and say, whoa, 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 this is going way too far? How does what someone posts on social media expressing their opinions, when, yeah, it's not, it might be a little bit impolite, but how is that causing harm to anyone?
Well, and imagine being this professional organization and thinking, you know who we should punch at today? Jordan Peterson. and thinking that that's not going to have you end up on Tucker Carlson, the subject of mockery for weeks on end. Like, how did they think this is all going to play out? Do they think Jordan Peterson's going to be like, you know what? I definitely was wrong about advocating for free speech and free thought. Yes, I will kowtow to this professional organization. Or is he the kind of guy who says, you know what? Screw it. I will continue to be the probably one of the most read authors in human history, and one of the preeminent thinkers of our time. Whether you agree with him or not, you cannot argue that he isn't that. Is he going to bend the knee to this little busybody organization of lady gulaggers, or is he going to make a bigger issue of this? I just can't believe how short-sighted they are.
And let's reserve complaints and real harms for actual patients. Like,
right.
where did regulatory bodies all of a sudden get off on, hey, we're just going to take these generic complaints that aren't directly related to the actual practicing profession of the person that we're trying to target, and just give it this broad umbrella of, if you say something that contradicts a widely accepted narrative, then you must be causing harms and we should investigate you. I mean, this is just insane. Typically, these governing bodies were there for protections in place for things like, you know, sexual assault, harassment, poor medical treatment, poor judgment calls,
right.
Not what somebody posts on their public social media platform because it criticizes the big government that is an inept failure at running a country. This is just absolute insanity. Like, those governing bodies need to rein in their overreach here, because they're putting their hand in all these cookie jars that really don't relate or have any sort of relevance in someone's ability to adequately treat a patient. And so when it's not patients directing these concerns and these complaints, then why are they even being validated by a governing body in the first place?
Because these aren't governing bodies anymore. We've seen them morph into quasi-political parties at this point, where they are stalking horses for government policy. They were at one point designed to protect the patients from bad doctors, but also doctors from government overreach. And now they are the tools of government overreach, to impose the will of the state on doctors who are simply trying to do right by their patients. And the idea that somebody would go to see Dr. Jordan Peterson for treatment, not knowing what Dr. Jordan Peterson was about, that's also crazy. Like, that's also crazy. This idea that anyone would go seek out treatment from Jordan Peterson and be like completely blindsided by his political views.
Just going to go out on a limb here and maybe speculate a little bit, but perhaps he hasn't been prescribing SRIs in the same manner that he was previously, now that he's, detoxed and brought himself back from that pharma brain cloud that so many people suffer under. Yeah. And perhaps now he's not one of these purveyors of big pharma anymore. And so, of course, naturally, they have to come after him and try to compel a free speech advocate's speech. It seems strangely ironic to me.
Yes.
But
we should bump ahead because speaking of government overreach and doing dumb things, there's always the Biden administration to talk about. And as it turns out, us Canadians, we remain plague rats to the United States. Last night, or I guess it would be this morning, although it was leaked last night, the United States quietly extends its COVID vaccination mandate for non-citizen international travelers through April. Now, that's not quite accurate, although I guess it is accurate if you're using the terminology. But Katie Davis-Court, her sub-headline here is exactly my issue with this. I think you should be able to say who can come into your country for whatever reason. That's sovereignty, right? So if the Americans don't want us filthy Canadians crossing the border, fine and dandy. My problem is the hypocrisy here because, as Katie notes, despite the porous southern border allowing a constant stream of illegal entries into the country, the Biden administration is continuing its policies of barring unvaccinated travelers from entering the United States. So the problem is us Canadians are trying to do this illegally. So we're trying to jump through all the hoops. We're showing up at the border with our passport and we're like, hey, here's me. I'm a Canadian. I won't be any trouble. I'm just here to buy cheap milk and cheese and take it back across the border. But if you are an illegal migrant from Central and Southern America, and I'm not even saying Mexico because they're using Mexico as a stopover a lot of times, you can just wander in, trash the local places, and end up in a shelter, crowded and looking not all that sanitary, by the way, as Katie pointed out when she went to the airport that had been turned into a migrant facility, an ICE detention facility, I guess, but they weren't really detained. You could just come and go as you please. But yeah, if you're a Canadian just trying to follow the rules, no, there's no room for you here. But yeah, you can just break the rules and get in and it's fine. And they will bus you to wherever you want to be.
And there seems to be some discrepancy there also between flying in via air and then crossing on land borders. And I mean, what about anyone at sea if you're going through any water channels, things like this? And I know that there are many unvaccinated travelers who have readily and fairly easily, from what I understand, crossed land borders and are frequenting various spots in the United States. That's not to say that everybody who tries gets through, but I haven't myself. I have no idea what that looks like. But from what I'm hearing, it's not very difficult to get into the States via land border as an unvaxxed anyone. It's just whether or not you go to the right border at the right time and get the right agent or wrong agent, depending on how you're looking at it.
Yeah, and they're not clear, as you say, about whether this applies to air travelers, land travelers, sea travelers. So can you get on a cruise in Vancouver and go to Alaska if you're unvaccinated? How quickly is that going to change? Like nobody knows really what's going on. So how does anybody book travel plans? And it's just so unclear. And as you say, sometimes it's just up to the will or the sticklerness of whatever border agent you get.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you brought up a point too earlier, Sheila, about how some of these border towns are really suffering at the hands of this mandate and separating families and crushing business, sort of the economic exchanges that happen there. Can you maybe give us a run through of what you mentioned earlier today to me off the live stream?
Sure. Yeah. It was something we talked about in our morning staff meeting because we were talking about this exact issue. There are towns across the border, like, for example, Coutts, Alberta, and Sweetgrass, Montana, they really operate as one community, right? Because neither town is big enough to have all the services to provide for a couple hundred people here and a couple hundred people there. And we saw during the Coutts blockade, they had to let the school bus through because kids are going back and forth on the school bus. There are places in southern Manitoba where they have one hockey team. That's it. The rink might be on the Canadian side, but the American kids come across to play. And as a Canadian, your doctor is on the American side because there's no doctor in your town. I think it's Point Roberts, Washington. You can only access it through Canada. The town is like 1,200 people. Their bank closed because they don't have enough commerce happening because the Canadians weren't allowed in. I think one restaurant said that they had like a 90 or 95% of their business was Canadians. Bellingham, Washington, at the Costco there, they used to call us Canadians the Red Plague, because I joked about us coming down to buy milk and cheese that isn't Soviet controlled by the state. But that is the case. Canadians would come to the Costco and like clean out the dairy section and then go back because it's a lot cheaper to buy your dairy in the United States where there's no quotas. And that commerce isn't happening in those communities because us dirty, rotten, gross, plague-carrying Canadians are not allowed across the border. And again, I say, like a sovereign state, they have a right to let anybody into their country that they want or decline anybody from entering into their country. But the economic fallout in these border towns is very real, and it's catastrophic for American business owners, not just Canadians looking for a bargain, but the American business owners providing that bargain to them. Their industries are being leveled, and it is completely unfair. And of course, it's unscientific, because if they drop the border mandate for land crossers, how do they keep it for air travelers? Where's the science there? Somebody explain that one to me.
Well, and even as it stands right now, depending on where you go and who you get, you can still cross in on the land. So there's unvaccinated people and the migrants just come and go as they please, really. So yeah, the science obviously doesn't line up, doesn't match. And even if this was effective, the mandate itself was marketed to the public as being this effective injection that stopped the spread and stopped infection. And now we see that that's not the case. So the whole narrative is basically in crumbs on the floor, but you have the Biden administration still upholding their useless, unscientific mandate while hypocritically and simultaneously having, as Katie described it, which I really like, the porous borders to the south, just having people come and go, really on the American taxpayer dime.
Yeah, we saw the same thing happen in Canada here. We had that access to information document that showed that as they were imposing the vaccine mandates on cross-border truckers that spurred the Freedom Convoy in Canada here, they were relaxing not just you could get into the country illegally in Canada, just walk across Roxham Road. You didn't need to have a vaccine, but they decided we aren't even going to screen them for COVID because it's taking too long. And there are so many of them coming that it's causing a backlog in the migrant hotels. So let's just let them go. While simultaneously Canadians, law-abiding Canadians just wanting to do their jobs and support their families, they were facing a vaccine mandate that could put up to, as Chrystia Freeland's notes suggested, 50% of them out of work.
Absolutely ridiculous. This seems like a really great segue to skip. We were going to show a couple clips, but I think that I would rather just kind of skip ahead to talk about the immigration crisis, because it kind of ties in with what we were just discussing here. So
I think we have an ad break scheduled, though. Let's do an ad break and then come to that.
I'm messing up the whole thing. All right.
No,
sounds good. We're all rusty.
We started off this convoy calling it Taking Back Our Freedoms, but our freedoms are nobody's to take away. So we're going to restore everybody's freedoms.
Lots of people came here wanting to only do a day, and the word with all the truckers is they're now staying for many days. Like a lot of people now are planning on days and days in Ottawa. So
we are here to end the mandat.
I am not leaving till we get what we want. We're not going to give up.
I'm on lunch. I could be on lunch a long, long time. My body, my choice! My body, my choice!
Alrighty.
All right.
Let's go to your immigration story.
Yeah, well, it wasn't mine. It's from the Globe and Mail. But it notes here that Canada is going to be adding just over 437,000 new permanent they added 437,000 permanent residents in 2022. This topped the department's target for the year, as well as the previous high of 405,000, which was the amount that came in 2021. And I also want to note that approximately half of all of the new permanent residents, i.e. immigrants, will reside in southeastern Ontario. So half of them will come here to southeastern Ontario. And we are also facing massive backlash from the Doug Ford progressive conservatives who are leveraging to develop the Green Belt in Ontario. And people are just up in arms about the development of this vast green space. And I'm not in favor of massive development of prime farmland and breaking up that very important segment of property and land and space that can go to feeding our population. However, when you're accepting approximately 220,000 immigrants into your province in a tiny segment of the province, where do you expect that they're going to be housed? And how is this going to impact the already overcrowded highways that we have in this section of the province? The 401 is known for its traffic delays, accidents, just being a terrible stretch of highway. And people aren't thinking about why that development needs to take place. They're just criticizing the government for taking away their lush farmland, which I agree with. I agree that is not ideal. But let's look at why it's being proposed and taking place. And that's because of these super progressive immigration policies that are just further compounding the harsh reality faced by Canadians and specifically Ontarians with the rising cost of living, the housing crisis, and all of the inflationary business that we have to deal with the fallout of.
Yeah, there's a confluence of a lot of problems here. But at the end of the day, if you are an advocate for newcomers, you have to say, we have to slow this down because we're not setting them up for success either when they come here. People come to Canada for a bunch of different reasons, same reasons our ancestors came here. I know that's why mine came here and settled in Alberta. And, you know, it's the opportunity to own something, have something, be something. But if you are setting people up to come here where they will never be able to afford a house, because the housing can never catch up to the amount of people you're allowing into the country, how does anybody get ahead? We had documents that said that the Liberals had never done any analysis on how the immigration targets are affecting housing prices and inflation. And like you, I'm not a big fan of turning lush prime farmland into condos. But at the same time, there are development rules that are sort of putting pressure on housing developers outside of developing the green belt, all these environmental issues where, you know, just let them build a house without adding all these extra costs onto, you know, like environmental assessments and nonsense like that, when it's just basically pay for this permit, pay for that permit. It's an environmental assessment, and it adds to the cost of the house, and it keeps people out of the housing market. And there are places you can't build and places you can build, and you can only build up and not out, as though anybody wants to live stacked on top of each other in a coffin. But more than anything, this is the one thing that the Conservatives fall down on, because we know what the Liberals are like, but the Conservatives need to be the voice of no on this. And it's, again, if you care about newcomers, you got to be setting them up for success too. Across the board, regardless of your political leanings, Canadians overwhelmingly want lower immigration targets once you tell them what the existing targets are. And this has been repeated and replicated in study after study since at least 2019. 63% of Canadians, once you tell them what those immigration targets are, they want the government to limit immigration. And that applies across the board to NDPers and Liberals alike. Conservatives naturally. But where's the Conservative Party on this? Why aren't they saying, no, listen, we don't have enough houses. It's pushing young people away from a Canadian dream of ever owning a house with a backyard and not having 9 million roommates living with you and ever dreaming of getting married and having children that could live outside of an apartment. Only 37% of Canadians said the priority should be on growing immigration. And again, that's across demographics. Even 57% of Green Party members said our immigration targets are too high. Now, they might be saying it for different reasons than me. Like, they might be saying it because, oh, we don't want all these immigrants tromping around on all of our lush green space. They might be saying it for that reason. They might be worrying about the fossil fuel impact of having people from a low fossil fuel developing world coming to our part of the world where they need fossil fuels to stay alive. They might have their own reasons. But regardless, where are the Conservatives saying, you know what, we got to rethink this because it's not good for anybody. But again, they're sort of silent on this issue.
Yeah, and another issue that you bring up too, Sheila, is how unfair it is to the people coming into Canada, especially trained professionals. There are so many trained professionals that come into our country that are prevented from continuing with their profession because of government red tape that's in the way of them. So they're doing things like becoming Uber drivers, taxi drivers, food delivery, these mundane blue-collar jobs when they're heavily and highly trained professionals from their home country, but because their skill set or their education rather doesn't easily translate or transfer over in Canada, they're prevented from bettering the economy with their skill set and their experience. And that's a really unfortunate part of this. And another reason why we could say, whoa, slow down. Let's work out the kinks here on how we properly and adequately integrate people into Canada so they can transfer their skills and their experience and their education and become get adequate members of a society. And sadly, that's not happening under these progressive conservatives or these far left extremist liberals. And it's all really in shambles, and it's only set to increase instead of decrease to figure out a way to make it work better. And meanwhile, maybe that's how we can kind of circle back to those clips that we had of Trudeau, who's saying that the Conservatives are busy pitting urban Canadians against rural Canadians instead of focusing on the real issues that his government has neglected for going on 6 years.
Right. It's the Conservatives playing on the ignorance of urban Canadians to push through their gun bans. It's the Conservatives doing all of that. Let's show that clip. It makes me very angry.
Into hypotheticals.
Well, it's not hypothetical.
Well,
they've said it.
They've said that they might do it, yes. Yeah. But the reality is Canadians are overwhelmingly worried about gun violence, want to see stronger gun control. We have a mandate to do exactly that, and that's what we've done. We banned assault-style weapons. We've frozen the market on handguns, and now we're ensuring that there is a definition going forward so assault-style weapons remain banned. Now, there's been a lot of misinformation and disinformation around it, and I'll be entirely honest. There are some guns out there, not many, but some, that hunters are now using for hunting that are overpowered or have characteristics that make them assault-style weapons, and the definition will probably catch those. And there are some people who hunt with a gun that is considered an assault-style weapon who will have to change weapons on that and will have a buyback for that weapon because they're not criminals. But we are changing the definition to make sure that guns designed to kill the largest number of people as quickly as possible have no place in this country.
Did you screw up the legislation, though?
No, we continue to moving. We're continuing.
Well, I think everyone you've been very criticized by everybody under the sun, the NDP, First Nations, Conservatives, other groups. So that indicates to me that it's not right the way it is now.
It indicates to me that it's a hard thing to do, to move forward on gun control in a country where the gun lobby holds a lot of sway in a lot of places. The Conservative Party is moving hard, and they have successfully weaponized a pitting of urban Canadians against rural Canadians. But that's not our focus. Our focus is on making sure that the guns that have no place in Canada because they're assault-style weapons are continued to be banned. But the Conservatives have been very, very clear on it. They want to reverse our ban on assault-style weapons. I think most Canadians actually are in line with wanting to make sure that assault-style weapons stay
I think
banned.
it's interesting that you think the Conservatives are pitting people against each other, because they would say the same about you, and particularly that you are, as they may be, also entrenching division between rural and urban voters because you rely on urban voters.
Yes. What an idiot. As he's
I was
talking there,
shocked to see Rosemary Barton kind of pushing back, and instead of just being like a gloating cheerleader for Justin Trudeau, whether or not, you know, that's all a scripted actor scene. I was surprised.
yeah, I don't think somebody's getting a Valentine's Day card from her this year. It's funny to listen to him talk because he's saying we've frozen the market on handguns. No, you haven't. You've frozen the legal market on handguns. So the people who are jumping through all the hoops to own their handguns, they can't do anything with their handguns. But the gangsters are still getting them from the very, as Katie rightly says, the porous northern border this time. They're being trafficked from the United States. And those are ending up in the hands of gangsters. They're not calling ahead to the CFO to be able to take their handgun to the range, the only place that you can use it in this country, by the way, like I am. They're not doing any of that stuff. They're just giving some gangster 20 or $200 and taking their pistol out and wreaking havoc with it. And it's funny because he says stuff like assault style weapons. The reason he has to use a very vague term to confuse urbanites, and he's the guy who's pitting urban against rural, because as a rural person, I'm like, what is Toronto? Quit doing this to me, because I blame Toronto for doing this to me all the time. But he can't say machine guns, and he can't say automatic weapons, because those have already been banned forever. So he uses this vague term that urbanites who don't know anything about guns think, oh my gosh, Justin Trudeau's saving us. He's banning machine guns. There are people out there hunting deer with machine guns, they think, or automatic weapons. But the one that really makes me laugh is when he says there are overpowered hunting rifles out there that shouldn't be in the hands of people. This guy banned the Mini 14 ranch rifle, which arguably you might not want to be shooting a coyote with. It's great for badgers, as I told David Menzies yesterday, but it's more of like a larger varmint rifle. You wouldn't use it for deer, that's for sure. He banned that in the 1500 gun ban. And now he's accusing the 70-year-old SKS, the Soviet rifle, of being too overpowered. And a few people will have to turn those over. That's one of the most popular rifles in this country because it's cheap, it's easily customizable, there's lots of ammunition around. It's an entry-level hunting rifle for a kid that just got his PAL and just got his little win card. So he's got his hunting license and he's going to get a deer tag this year. There are 200,000 of those that we know of in this country, and that's the ones we know of, because we don't know the ones that came into the country or that were that came to be after the gun registry fell. So we know that there were 200,000 of those before, but we don't know how many of them are now. I would suggest it's probably double, and I would suggest that probably it was way more than 200,000 back then, because a lot of people were like, I'm not registering my grandpa's SKS with the government. I'm just going to leave it in the gun case. So I would suggest there's probably 500,000 of those loose in the country. How's Justin Trudeau going to get his hands on those? What's he going to do? Well, as I said to David Menzies, they're going to kick everybody's door in. Is that what they're going to do? I don't think that's going to work out well for anybody involved.
And it's still not going to do anything to stop the illegal gun violence that's plaguing the country. This has literally done nothing to curb gun violence because it's coming from gangs and illegal gun owners targeting lawful, law-abiding gun owners. You know, I feel like a broken record, has done absolutely nothing to stop gun-related crime in this country across the board. And I mean, I don't know what the stats are around the world, but I would assume the same.
We just have to look at Chicago. Like, we are turning Canada into Chicago. Chicago is a gun-free zone where gangsters shoot up the place every weekend, where the hospitals are overrun with people who are experiencing gunshot wounds in their gun-free zone because the people do not have guns to protect themselves. So the only people who have the guns are the gangsters, and they have free reign. So Justin Trudeau thought, you know what, let's look at Chicago. What's Chicago doing? What's the home of Obama doing? Let's do more of that in Canada. What kind of lunatic does that? But here we are. He somehow seems to think that turning somebody's grandpa into a criminal on paper is going to make the streets of Toronto safer. And it is a waste of stretched police resources. And I guarantee you there are plenty of cops, particularly in rural Canada. The last thing they want to do is go kick in the doors of their hunting buddies. But that is what Justin Trudeau expects them to do.
Or as Rosemary Barton so eloquently put it, the Indigenous communities who utilize these types of weapons, I shouldn't say weapons, but this type of equipment to hunt and gather and partake in generational collection of livestock and meats. And they are increasingly upset with this government, who's just been full of broken promises right from the get-go. I think they campaigned on the clean drinking water for every Indigenous community and reservation across the country, which has been an inept failure over the last 6 years. And now the Justin Trudeau Liberals are just infringing on their ability to hunt and gather and eat and provide for their families. So there are a lot of people becoming increasingly displeased with the way that this government is handling itself. And again, doing very little to prevent or curb the real crime that is plaguing the country and only increasing in nature instead of decreasing, while the Liberals are too focused on targeting the lawful, law-abiding citizens of the country.
Yeah, I'm reluctant to even divide the firearms community into specific demographics because, as I pointed out to David yesterday, by the numbers, sports shooting, hunting, it is the Canadian national sport. By the numbers, more people do it than hockey. And so, and it is a traditional way of life for me, but for Indigenous people, for people who have a trap line, it's our traditional way of life. This country would not exist without brave men and firearms. It's why people came here in the first place, was to harvest animals using firearms. That's why anybody is here in the first place. And Justin Trudeau, besides the fact that people should be able to do the things they've traditionally done if they're not hurting anybody or breaking any existing laws, this is a complete and total toss-out of our history. This is along the same vein as tearing down statues. This is Justin Trudeau just wants to rewrite Canadian history because it is incompatible with the voters he needs in Toronto. I could talk about it all day. We should throw to an ad. And then let's go to this story on how the Office of the Privacy Commissioner is investigating a story that we broke before the Christmas break. And they're not investigating a story. They're investigating the things we broke in the story. I should be very clear because this is the federal government. They would naturally investigate us for just about anything. So let's do the ad break.
It's the values. You look at Western values in Western society, and these are values we could all relate to, but they're old world values of grit and community and perseverance.
It's a place where you can make a living with your back and your hands and a little bit of hard work. And it's a place of opportunity. And I think as Albertans, we're fiercely protective of that.
The world's energy crisis has been grabbing newspaper headlines. In a nutshell, we're running short of petroleum resources and the prices are zooming upwards.
My colleagues in the government and I have come reluctantly to believe that the price of oil in Canada must go up.
This was Alberta.
Origin of the Alberta separatist movement begins with the election of Pierre Trudeau as Prime Minister.
It was a deliberate and malicious targeting of the West, which suited Pierre Trudeau just fine, just like it suits Justin Trudeau just fine.
Sunny ways, my friends.
Blackface.
There is an actual hostile government towards Alberta.
Why did your dad give everyone in Western Canada the middle finger?
Really, in politics, you do have to make big decisions, and whenever you make big decisions, there's going to be people who agree with it and people who don't disagree with it.
Plenty of people want to leave this country.
It's not the kind of idea you'd expect to hear from someone who wants to win power and hold power. It is a radical idea.
And you would normalize the discussion. And so maybe Alberta wouldn't have to go, because maybe the rest of the country and the rest of the world would say, whoa, don't go. Will you accept these changes instead? That's what happened for Quebec.
There's no maple leafs west of the Manitoba border. Why do we have a maple leaf by unilateral decision on the Canadian flag?
Think of how the American colonists were in 1775. That's how a lot of Albertans are today.
It's a great documentary. I'm in it. Go to albertadocumentary.com.
How could it not be?
To see it today. Let's go to this story, and it is about the Public Health Agency wanting to snoop on Canadians for vaccine hesitancy. Now the Privacy Commissioner is getting involved because, Efron, do you want to throw up the story about the Privacy Commissioner getting involved, if you have that?
That was the one I did yesterday. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. So, okay, so this is the one that I wrote up way back in December of 2022. So last year, it was just before the Christmas break. I was poking around on the procurement's website, as I tend to do, because it is a good indicator of what the government is planning to do to you going forward. And I found this request for information. They were looking to hire a social media snoop to monitor Canadians' opinions on vaccines and whether or not they're hesitant. Basically, they wanted to monitor, as they say, online conversation and audience analysis of vaccine confidence in Canada. So someone who would just lurk in the background, an anonymous weirdo who would basically be a quiet big brother to see what Canadians agree with vaccines, what are they saying about vaccines, and moreover, how do we change their minds about vaccines? And as it turns out now, this story is sort of come into outside of just the conservative sphere into the mainstream, and the Privacy Commissioner is now investigating this contract. And that is your friends at Rebel getting results, because nobody would even know about this unless we had done the boring work of poking around that website. And it's not the first time that we've done this either. The fact that the nation even knows that the Public Health Agency of Canada monitored 33 million cell phones was because we were poking around on that website and we saw that they were renewing the contract, a contract nobody knew existed. And they were looking for an extension of this contract. And that's when we said, oh my goodness, they've already been monitoring this. Then the Conservatives got their hands on it. Then we started figuring out what companies were involved, how much they were selling your information for, and what exactly they were using your cell phone to track. They wanted to know how close you came to a nursing home. They wanted to know if your phone came in contact with somebody else's phone to see if you were being compliant. And even worse, these weirdos backdated it to, I think, 2019, so they could see if you had changed your behavior based on their advice, and TELUS sold your information without your knowledge to the Public Health Agency of Canada. And so these people just can't help themselves. The moral of the story, the Public Health Agency of Canada, they are just voyeuristic weirdos who want to see how much they can change your behavior and gaslight you into doing the unscientific things they want you to do. They just cannot help themselves. They just want to monitor Canadians like they're ants in an ant farm. They're just a bunch of total weirdos. Anyways, I'm done.
Well, and it's led by none other than Chief Medical Officer of Health, Theresa Tam, who is taking pages right out of CCP's playbook and just disregarding the privacy of Canadians altogether in order to accelerate her agenda of imposing behavior modification techniques to garner the compliance of the Canadian population. And this should come as no surprise to many people who've been following our reports. And I've been following it fairly closely, dating back to the spring of 2022, where Theresa Tam was heard in a behavioral sciences roundtable at the World Health Assembly, which is done in conjunction with the World Health Organization, talking about how she intends to nudge Canadians into compliance towards what she calls healthy behaviors. So, of course, that means lining up for your COVID vaccine every 90 days.
Doing drugs over Zoom.
Yeah.
That was her advice. Doing drugs over Zoom. That's her great advice. Close the gyms, by the way. They closed the gyms, and then it comes a study of, I think, 191,000 positive COVID cases showed that even moderate activity before COVID diagnosis changed the outcome of people. It was almost a complete and total prophylactic against negative COVID outcomes. And these are the people who are like, close the gyms to prevent COVID, stay home to stay safe, Netflix chill and Uber Eats yourself into an early grave. These lunatics closed the national park beside me because they not only could you not go to the gym, but they didn't want you wandering around outside or running around, in my case, or snowshoeing around. They closed the national park as though I'm going to give COVID to the buffalo or vice versa. This was the science that they told us. And if we were skeptical of any of it, we were the unscientific lunatics. And then they have the audacity to monitor your criticism of them online. Psychos.
Well, it just speaks further to the Justin Trudeau Liberals and their repertoire of ethics violations. And I think we have a clip on that. So maybe we'll show this clip, and we're running out of time and we have a couple super chats to get to. So let's just show this quick clip of Justin Trudeau explaining why his government must partake in ethics violations. And then we'll get to some super chats before we wrap it up.
Healthcare. There seems to be a standoff right now between your government and the provinces. Your focus, you say, is on results.
We're going to go the other clip.
Dollars.
That's okay.
The premiers want a meeting with you. You have so far resisted. Why not just meet with them? Why not just say, we're not going to get a deal, but I'm going to sit down and we're going to unblock things?
I have spoken with the premiers. I have met with the premiers more often on healthcare than any
during COVID,
other.
not quite the same thing.
Well, it is the same thing because we saw during COVID the weaknesses in our system, the gaps in our system, the challenges in our healthcare system.
Except you refused to talk to them about healthcare funding during the pandemic, right? You said it'll be after the pandemic we'll have this
conversation. Actually, that's not entirely true.
Okay.
What I said is we would be there during the pandemic for supports, and we were there to the tune of $72 billion on top of all our normal healthcare spending. And then
gosh, it's insane.
Afterwards, I said, yes, let's talk about the future of healthcare. And I have said consistently, we'll be there for more funding. But we can't just put money into broken systems. We need the premiers to commit to improvements on results for Canadians.
So you won't sit down with them unless a deal is worked out before?
But I have been sitting down.
You have not sat down and talked to them about healthcare
Not
funding.
collectively.
No.
Individually, I've spoken with almost every single one of them to express that we need results. We will be there with more money because we know we need more money. But we also need this time the premiers to actually make the improvements that too many of them haven't been making.
That sounds to me like a prime minister, though, who's going to pick off provinces and make side deals with everybody instead of sitting down and coming to an agreement.
Okay. If I can do anything that will help one family in one place get better services, I'm willing to do it. If not all of them want to come to the table, I will work with them individually. But I think what all Canadians need, and quite frankly what the responsibility of the federal government under the Canada Health Act is, to make sure that all Canadians can get access to universal, free, quality health care across the country, and that is what we're doing. I am not going to give them the blank check that they want because they are not making the improvements in general. Some of them are, but many of them are simply
What
not.
is your understanding of what more money would do?
Listening to them is
Tamara,
like an old married couple, honestly.
It's true. I swore off drinking after New Year's, but that stuff makes me want to pour a little whiskey in my coffee. Listening to these two people argue about healthcare sitting in a bakery seems a little bit of an odd backdrop to all of this. But the reason he won't sit down is because there are a couple of provinces who are healthcare innovators right now, and they're not scared. One of them is Alberta, and the other one is Saskatchewan. Alberta is reducing the size and scope of the healthcare bureaucracy and innovating, and changes are happening very, very, very fast in the Alberta healthcare system. It's scaring the daylights out of the public sector unions, which warms the cockles of my heart. And Saskatchewan, for a long time, has allowed public-private partnerships in healthcare to allow people to have quicker access to care at a cheaper rate. Like, they spend far less on healthcare than we do in Alberta, in Saskatchewan, and they get access to surgeries and MRIs a heck of a lot faster because they allow those public-private partnerships. And so naturally, Trudeau doesn't want to sit down with all the premiers. He might want to sit down with Doug Ford. He's probably going to want to sit down with the BC premier, but he does not want to sit down with Danielle Smith and Scott Moe, that's for sure. So he can't commit to that in the carbohydrate-rich environment in which he and Rosie Barton are arguing about healthcare spending.
Yeah, and I'm glad we touched on and brought up that little clip, but it wasn't the original clip that we were supposed to throw to there. So because we're tight for time, I don't know, we'll go a couple minutes over, I guess. We're supposed to have another meeting at 2 p.m. Eastern, but you know what, for the sake of getting all of the things and throwing to that clip, let's just go to the ethics violation one that we were originally going to throw to. Yeah.
Efron, we're all going to be late for this meeting. Just roll the clip.
We'll get there. Who's counting? It's just a couple minutes, right? And then we have a couple super chats. So thank you everyone for sending those in, and we'll get to them as soon as we pull up this small little ethics violation clip. There it is.
You have violated ethics rules. So have members of your cabinet, and most recently your international trade minister. Why do these ethical breaches keep happening, and why haven't you been able to stop them?
Well, I think, first of all, our government is focused on getting things done for Canadians, on delivering the kinds of results that Canadians elected us to do. Ambitious.
But you can do that without breaching ethics.
When you do lots of things, every now and then people are going to make mistakes. And that is why it's a good thing that we have a system that catches those mistakes, that calls them out, that shares them with Canadians, that we explain, and Canadians get to decide whether it was an honest mistake or whether someone was trying to fill their pockets. I mean, we have a system that has the kind of accountability, transparency that works, and that is clear to reassure Canadians that if someone is taking advantage of the system, either deliberately or by accident, they'll get caught and called out on it. And that's an example of the institutions working. Now, from my perspective, it sucks because you don't want people to be making mistakes. You want people to be able to focus on delivering good things for Canadians.
But it's happened with you, it's happened with Mr. Morneau, it's happened with Ms. Ng. You've been in power for 7 years. What's missing? Why does it keep happening?
Oh, I think people are always going to be trying to do the right things, but every now and then there will be mistakes. And what we will continue to do is improve our systems, make sure people are being careful and learning from those mistakes.
And apologizing repeatedly.
you watching the body language there? First of all, he's just moving too darn fast to pay attention to those silly things like ethics. He's just doing too much for us. Watch his body language, though. I never noticed it before, but I'm going to take a careful look to some of his other clips when he's getting those tough questions. Watch his head. If we can slow this down, when he says, people are trying to do the right thing, his head is shaking like this. And so his body betrays the lie he's telling. His head is constantly shaking no, while he's telling you something that's not true. And he can't stop it. It's happening so fast when he says, people, they're trying to do the right thing. They're trying to do this. They're trying to do that. And his head is going back and forth, no, betraying the lie he's trying to tell.
Mm-hmm. There you go, Sheila Gunn Reid with the behavior science.
I watch a lot of YouTube videos on this stuff. Okay, let's get to some of these chats so we can we have a few. Thank you very much to everybody who pitched in to keep the lights on. We've got one from Aaron Burton, gives us Aaron Burton 32 might make a difference or not. Gives us $5. Keep up the great work. Missed the Daily Show a lot this past month. Well, thank you. We're glad to be back. Shauna Marie G83. She's a regular contributor, regular viewer. She probably missed us, I bet. She did. She says, I can't tell you how happy I am that the live stream is back. It's kind of like having coffee with a friend every day. I really miss you guys. You are my people. Thank you and much love.
I just want to say too, I think Shauna Marie had a brother that was seeking some cancer treatment care, if I remember correctly, from last year. And I hope that everything is working out for you and your family member.
Yeah. Yeah. See, you're our people too, Shauna Marie. Wrong Way 54 gives us $2. Thinks me got debug, feels like a mild cold. Have you noticed that people are sicker? And I think, I don't know, I'm going to get us banned from YouTube, so I'll just keep my opinions to myself. But yeah, it's odd, isn't it? I feel like
especially
people are getting sicker more frequently.
Young children who were not allowed or prevented from engaging in normal aspects of society for their entire life, if they're under the age of 2.5, which I have one of those at home myself, are definitely more sick and more susceptible than I ever remember before. This isn't my first rodeo. This is my 4th child. Yeah. And we have had a heck of a time. And every mom that I speak to that has a child, even under the age of 4, really, 4 or 5, who was barred during those key periods of robust immune building because of these lockdowns and restrictions and mandates, they're suffering as a result. In my experience, both anecdotally and in my own life and people that I speak to, it's really concerning. And I hope that we're over that hump now, but lesson hopefully learned for the future, that these restrictions, knee-jerk reactions have a fallout, and it's affecting our youngest demographics that were at no risk before.
Yeah, my kids developed their immune systems on the farm here and with grandma and in a disgusting indoor playground at -40. That's where.
See, the really weird thing,
all of it,
is we really didn't comply. We still hosted play dates. We found indoor play places that didn't comply. We were still frequenting, having a circle of friends, but it's still not the same as if you were out, at the grocery store, touching all the things, or going to swimming
sucking
lessons,
on the card handle.
And toddlers like to lick everything. So yeah, despite the best efforts to keep things as normal as possible, it couldn't have been, because the bulk of society did comply and did shutter and lock down. So it's really sad to be experiencing. Anyway.
Thanks for nothing, society, keeping your cooties away from Tamara's kids. Now they're always sick.
Thanks, Teresa Tam.
Thanks. Fraser McBurney, Fight the Fines recidivist from Hamilton, Ontario, who is a real lover of the caps lock. He gives us $5 and says, glad to see you back. I missed our daily dose of truth. Happy New Year to you all. Well, thanks very much. Tamara, why don't you take over the last 2? We've got one from, no, 3, I guess.
Adamant, I hope I pronounced that correctly. $1. Thank you. I got my fill of guns for 26 plus years in the Army and never thought about becoming a gun owner until now. I can't believe JT looks at the camera and just lies about what's in that law's amendment. I mean, unsurprising again, given the fact that we just played that ethics violations clip. Kenzie67 gives $5. Thank you. Please look into the biotech that the government of Canada are looking at, and it's buy-sell posting. Thank you. I'll take a look at that as soon as we're done this live stream and our meeting. And then Alberta.
By the way, Tamara, sorry, that's the policy horizons. This is the bureaucrats' think pieces. So it's not really like a contract, but it is the way the bureaucracy is thinking the government should move. So it's some pretty scary stuff. You'll find some very weird think pieces in there. Sorry, I'll shut up.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. Alberta Dawn gives $5. I'm packing my range gear and firearms for the range while listening. Awesome. Awesome's my commentary. JT must disclose how many migrants since 2015 and how many are employed. Our health system can't handle migrant seniors. Yeah, I mean, that's another great point when we are expecting half of them to come into Ontario with an absolutely crumbling in shambles healthcare system. And people who come from other countries with credentials and a background in medical professional services are being prevented from partaking in that here in Canada, and then adding to the system the whole thing. We already mentioned and talked about it. It's an absolute mess. So thank you everyone for your comments, your feedback. Let us know what time slot works best for you, what you'd like to see more of in the live stream, and of course, just Rebel in general moving into 2023, because you're our bloodline. We depend on the generosity of our donors and our supporters to keep the lights on and keep going. So we really appreciate your feedback and look forward to hearing more from you.
Thanks. And as David Menzies always says, stay sane.